I'm not calling for Emmanuel Macron to resign. I'm saying that there will come a time when, if we don't take the path of respect for the voters and respect for the political forces and respect for the elections, that the pressure on the president will obviously get more intense. But he alone will have the decision, the last word.
Let's get more from Bloomberg anchor Kriti Gupta, who is on the ground for us in Paris. Kriti, what a momentous few hours, I should say. Overnight, of course, towards the end of the day yesterday in Paris. What is next then for Emmanuel Macron? Where does he go from here?
Well, Tom, I've never learned more about the French Constitution than I have in the last 24 hours because we are in uncharted territory and there is a way out, but it gets a little bit tricky. And as you just heard from Marine Le Pen herself in that interview, she's not calling for the resignation of Emmanuel Macron, but the far left absolutely is. So that is certainly on the table. It only adds to the pressure to the French president to really find a caretaker prime minister. That could be Michel Barnier if he's chosen to kind of hold on to the reins. It's a playbook that he had used previously with Gabriel Attal, one of his kind of favorites within the centrist party as well, to kind of hold on to the public finances, to hold on to the job until he figures out his next step. There are a couple of other candidates, though. We'll get to that in a moment. But basically, as we find the caretaker prime minister, whoever that may be, it is likely that this French government will have to use what they call a special law, a loi spéciale, basically bringing over the 2024 budget into 2025. And what that means is that in the first couple of months of next year, you could actually see even more austerity than some of the measures that Michel Barnier was proposing, just given the constraints that come 12 months after this 2024 budget was passed. That includes things like defense, taxes, inflation, all of that likely to affect French citizens.
Yeah, there's certainly an irony in that, isn't there, given the opposition from the left and the right to this budget, that maybe you even get more austerity next year as a result of this impasse. Who is on the list then as potential next prime ministers that Macron could reach out to?
Well, France has a habit or a tradition of bringing back figures from the past, and that's where certain former prime ministers could retake the role potentially. Certain candidates that's come to mind. Bernard Cazeneuve is one of the key names that keep coming up. He was one that was that name was floated quite aggressively when Michel Barnier was first being considered. Of course, Michel Barnier did get the job. There's a couple of others, including the current Minister of Armed Forces, the Defense Secretary in essence, as well as Jean Castex, who is also a former prime minister, as well as a major other centrist leader as well. There are basically several candidates, but I think what you need to know is Emmanuel Macron is trying to show stability. He's trying to show that whoever is going to take on this role has done the job before and can do it again. And that's why some of these names are being circulated.
Kriti, how is the market reacting to all of this uncertainty? I pointed out that equities in France seem to be relatively resilient, at least at this point. What's your take in terms of the market reaction to this? Maybe the focus should be on sovereign debt in France.
Yeah, well, I think the storm is beneath the surface in this scenario because yesterday, if you looked at the French market, it actually closed much higher. You saw green on the screen in the French equity market, but where you saw the underperformance, I think this is crucial because equities around the world rallied yesterday, but French stocks still underperformed relative to their international peers, and that's where you see the stress. If you look at the banking stocks, if you look at French bonds, if you look at even some of the debt, the corporate debt of French banks, that's where you're seeing the underperformance. There is a fabulous Goldman index that really talks about this and shows just how much pressure they're facing because, of course, in the equity market, French banks and specifically have taken a major hit because of their exposure to French bonds. That's actually showing up in the corporate bonds of the French banks as well. The debt of the likes of SocGen, for example, or Crédit Agricole, among many others. BNP Paribas, of course, top of mind as well. So that's where it's showing up. The euro also continuing to underperform. That we're waiting for on the German side as well. You can see the premium staying elevated. It's not closing at the moment. So those are kind of the early signs of stress. But Tom, what I'm hearing from investors here in Paris is that this is likely to be a story that is slow, that is steady, and that really lasts into 2027. So the pain could be quite elongated.